Some deaths are caused by illness, others by accident. But then there are deaths so unnecessary and careless, they leave you stunned. In this video, we'll look at 5 more real stories of people who died in ways that could have easily been avoided. Decisions so reckless they turned deadly. These are not made-up tales. These are real lives lost in the most tragically avoidable ways imaginable. It was July 4th, 2024, in Somerville, South Carolina. The neighborhood was filled with fireworks, music, and people celebrating Independence Day. For most, it was a night of fun and tradition. But for 41-year-old Alan Ray McGrew, this would be his final 4th of July. Alan was well known in his neighborhood. That night, he wore a full Uncle Sam costume, top hat, red, white, and blue suit, and a fake beard. He loved the holiday more than anyone else, and his excitement showed. Alan often went out of his way to entertain others, and this party was no different. Friends and neighbors saw him as the life of the celebration, always doing something bold to make people laugh. But this year, Alan pushed it too far. Around 10:30 p.m., after hours of celebration, Alan lit a large mortar-style firework, the kind used in big public shows. Most people were watching from a distance or using small sparklers. Alan, however, had other plans. He first held the firework above his top hat, but in a sudden decision, he placed it directly on his head. His wife, Paige McGrew, stood nearby, under the impression that he was still joking around and hadn't lit the firework yet. She later explained that she thought he was just showboating before setting it on the ground. In reality, the fireworks had already been lit. It exploded seconds later. The blast caused serious injuries to Alan's head. He collapsed, and despite people rushing to help, there was nothing anyone could do. He was pronounced dead at the scene by 11:10 p.m. Just moments earlier, Alan had been dancing and laughing with neighbors. He had recently celebrated his son Hunter's engagement and was excited about gaining a daughter-in-law. That night was meant to be full of happiness. Hunter was devastated. He had witnessed everything unfold before his eyes and struggled to make sense of what had just happened. The memory of watching his father's final moments would remain with him forever. News of the incident spread rapidly, drawing harsh judgments from some online commenters who suggested that Alan had been careless or under the influence. Paige was quick to defend her husband, insisting he wasn't a fool. She acknowledged that he had been drinking a little, but emphasized that it wasn't something he did often. It was a celebration, and he had simply been happy. Paige also mentioned that Alan had already decided this would be the last time he drank for a while. He had good reason to celebrate: his son's engagement, the holiday he loved most, and the people he cared about by his side. Those who knew Alan remembered him as kind, hardworking, and always willing to help others. A neighbor described him as the nicest guy, someone who'd mow lawns or help with house repairs without being asked. A video later shared online showed Alan dancing in his costume just before the explosion. He looked happy and carefree, completely unaware of the danger. What started as a moment of fun quickly turned into something no one could have imagined. Many asked the same question: why would someone put a firework on their head? Maybe it was the excitement of the night. Maybe he didn't fully realize the danger. But in the end, that one decision changed everything. The McGrew family now faces a life without Alan. The celebration turned into heartbreak, and the public's reaction added more pain. Still, his family hopes people will remember him not for that final mistake, but for the way he lived, joyful, generous, and full of love. Before the blast, Alan embraced his wife and son, telling them they were his rock and his heart. It was a clear message of how much they meant to him. As fireworks lit up the sky that night, the celebration faded into tragedy. Alan McGrew wanted to make people smile. In doing so, he paid the ultimate price. It was Christmas Day, December 25th, 2007, in San Francisco, California. As the San Francisco Zoo began closing around 5 p.m., what should have been a quiet holiday evening quickly turned into something terrifying for 3 young men. 17-year-old Carlos Eduardo Sousa Jr. from San Jose had spent the day at the zoo with his friends, 19-year-old Amritpal Paul Dhaliwal and 23-year-old Kulbir Dhaliwal. Their visit started like any normal trip, but by the end of the day, things had gone terribly wrong. Earlier that afternoon, the 3 friends had visited the Siberian tiger exhibit. Inside the enclosure was Tatiana, a 350-pound tiger with no known history of aggression. But several eyewitnesses said the group had been seen yelling, waving, and possibly throwing things at the tiger, upsetting her. Somehow, Tatiana managed to escape, something no one believed could actually happen. The enclosure had a moat and a wall nearly 12 feet high. It met all safety standards. Still, Tatiana got out. Some theories suggested the tiger might have leapt or climbed the wall, possibly triggered by more taunting or someone leaning too close. But nothing was confirmed. Once free, Tatiana went after the group. Carlos was attacked first. His injuries were severe. He suffered deep wounds to the head, neck, and chest. His jugular vein was damaged, and he had skull and spinal injuries. He died near the tiger's enclosure. The Dhaliwal brothers ran almost 300 yards to the zoo cafe for help. But things only got worse. Employees locked the doors, not realizing what was happening. Kulbir shouted for help, asking for towels and an ambulance, begging for someone to save his younger brother who had been seriously hurt. Emergency calls were made just minutes after the attack. At 5:08 p.m., a man believed to be Kulbir reported that his brother had been bitten. But at first, zoo staff didn't take the calls seriously. Some thought it might be a prank or that the callers were confused. They didn't realize Tatiana was actually out of her cage. When police finally arrived, they weren't allowed into the zoo right away. Security held them back for 16 minutes, afraid the tiger might escape into the city. When officers finally entered, they found Tatiana near the two brothers. The tiger turned toward them. To stop the danger, officers shot and killed her with a shot to the forehead. After Tatiana was taken down, more confusion followed. Some officers thought other tigers might also be loose. They used night vision gear and heavy weapons, searching the area for 18 more minutes before realizing Tatiana had been the only one out. Carlos Sousa's death shocked his family and friends. His funeral was quiet and full of pain. His mother said she just wanted to understand what happened. She wasn't thinking about lawsuits, only about getting answers. The Dhaliwal brothers were deeply affected too. Paul had serious injuries, while Kulbir, though less hurt physically, was mentally shaken. Both later took legal action against the zoo, saying the enclosure wasn't secure enough. The zoo eventually made safety upgrades. They raised the walls and added electrified fencing. But it was too late. A 17-year-old had lost his life, and two others would carry the scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of their lives. Tatiana's death brought mixed reactions. Some blamed the zoo. Others saw the tiger as a wild animal reacting to stress. But what stood out most was the loss of a young life and the lasting trauma left behind. The San Francisco Zoo reopened in 2008 with new safety measures, but the damage couldn't be undone. Memorials were set up in Carlos's honor, and the events of that day became a permanent part of the zoo's history. It was a Monday afternoon in 2007 in Pacoima, California. The weather was warm and things felt normal around the city. But for 21-year-old Brandon Julius Funches and his 23-year-old girlfriend, Michelle Wright, a simple outing turned into something tragic and hard to understand. Brandon and Michelle had known each other for years but had only been dating for about 3 months. On this day, they were driving around South Los Angeles, looking for a car part. Their drive led them to a railroad crossing near San Fernando Road and Branford Street, a spot that would soon become the scene of a terrible event. As they reached the crossing, the gate was already down. A Metrolink train heading to Lancaster was coming fast, nearly 80 miles per hour. Most people would wait. But instead of stopping, Brandon drove around 2 cars waiting at the crossing. He then parked his Dodge Magnum directly on the tracks, placing the passenger side, where Michelle sat, facing the oncoming train. Several people nearby saw it happen. Witnesses said the couple had been arguing loudly inside the car. Some said Brandon may have jumped out just before impact, while others believed he was thrown from the car when the train hit. The 450-ton train crashed into the car with such force that metal and debris flew across the area. Some of that debris struck Brandon, causing fatal injuries. Michelle survived but was badly hurt, with cuts and a concussion. Emergency crews rushed to help and used special tools to pull her from the wreck. She was taken to Providence Holy Cross Medical Center in Mission Hills and was in serious condition. Police began an investigation right away. Because of how the car was positioned and what witnesses described, they suspected Brandon had parked the car on the tracks on purpose. Some even believed he meant to cause harm to both himself and Michelle. From her hospital bed, Michelle told officers she believed Brandon had done it on purpose, insisting that he had been trying to kill them both. She described the fear she felt as the train came toward them. However, later on, Michelle gave a different account, claiming that Brandon had only been trying to beat the train and had not meant to hurt anyone. This change in her story confused investigators. Michelle couldn't remember if Brandon said anything before the crash or if he tried to get out. Her head injury might have affected her memory. Brandon's family also didn't believe he intended to hurt anyone. His uncle, Michael Ashford, told the media that people were wrong to call it a planned act. He believed it was simply a bad decision during a heated moment. Still, police stuck to their theory. They believed Brandon had purposely stopped on the tracks. The argument, the placement of the car, and the witnesses' reports all led them to that conclusion. No one on the train was hurt. The train stayed on the tracks, and all 125 passengers were safe. But the crash caused major damage. Pieces of the car were thrown more than a block away. One truck nearby was disabled after debris pierced its engine. In the end, Brandon was the only person who lost his life. Michelle would recover, but she would likely carry the trauma with her. Brandon's family struggled to accept the loss, unsure of what truly led to that moment. We may never know for sure what Brandon's intentions were. But that one decision, made in a moment of emotion, changed everything. And those who saw it or lived through it were left asking, why did it happen? And could it have been stopped? It was the evening of July 4th, 2025 in Houston, Texas, in the quiet and wealthy River Oaks neighborhood. Deborah Putzka-Tucci, 67, and Kevin Willis, 68, were preparing for their annual Independence Day party. The couple had gotten engaged earlier that year and were well known in their social circle. They loved fine wine and often traveled together, visiting vineyards around the world, from France and Italy to wine events in Texas. Over the years, they had built a large wine collection, carefully stored in a wine cellar inside their home on Avalon Place. That evening, the couple entered their wine cellar, surrounded by rare Bordeaux bottles Deborah had spent years collecting. They may have brought dry ice into the cellar to cool the wine or manage the humidity, but what they likely didn't realize was that the dry ice would soon turn deadly. Around 7 p.m., neighbors grew concerned when they hadn't heard from the couple. The house was unusually quiet. When first responders arrived, they noticed a strong chemical smell coming from inside. Firefighters suspected something dangerous was in the air and wore protective gear to enter the home. Inside the wine cellar, they found Deborah and Kevin. Both had passed away, overcome by carbon dioxide gas. The dry ice had melted, turning into this gas, which is heavier than air. In a closed space like a wine cellar, it slowly pushed out the oxygen, making it impossible to breathe. Lieutenant Larry Croson from the Houston Police explained the situation. When dry ice melts, it becomes carbon dioxide gas. In a place with poor airflow, that gas can build up quickly. Because it's invisible and has no smell, Deborah and Kevin wouldn't have noticed anything was wrong until it was too late. Dry ice is often used to keep things cold. It stays solid much longer than regular ice, but as it melts, it becomes a gas. In an enclosed area like a cellar, that gas can replace the oxygen in the air. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has warned about this risk, but it's not widely known. That one detail would end the lives of two people who had no reason to believe they were in danger. Deborah was a lawyer and accountant who loved to share her wine collection with others. Kevin was described as kind and generous. Together, they were active in the Chaîne des Rôtisseurs, a global food and wine group. Their friends remembered them as warm, joyful, and intelligent. Just days before the tragedy, Kevin had talked with a friend about making plans for the following week, plans that would never happen. Their home was a large, ivy-covered house that Deborah had bought in 2000 with her former husband. After the divorce, she kept the house, which had increased greatly in value over the years. It was a symbol of the life she had built. But that same home became the scene of their final moments. On that July evening, they were likely making last-minute touches in the cellar for the party. As the dry ice melted, carbon dioxide filled the room, and within minutes, it was fatal. The Houston police found no signs of foul play. The deaths were ruled accidental. No one could say for sure how long they stayed in the cellar as the gas built up, but the outcome was tragic. Their deaths were caused by something many people handle without knowing the risks. Dry ice, when not used properly, especially in small spaces, can be dangerous. Deborah and Kevin's passing shows how quickly things can go wrong, even in the most ordinary settings. It was July 6, 2025, in Indian River County, Florida. The time was around 4:30 p.m., and the summer heat was intense. Traffic on Interstate 95 was heavy as many people were traveling for the 4th of July weekend. Driving along the southbound lanes was 87-year-old Frank J. Quinn, a man from Vermont who was on a road trip across the country. Frank wasn't known to take risks. He was quiet, respectful, and always calm. But on this day, something unexpected changed everything. While driving, Frank noticed a turtle slowly crossing the road. Most people might have ignored it, assuming it would make it across safely. But not Frank. He deeply cared for living creatures and couldn't stand the idea of the turtle getting hurt. Without hesitation, he pulled over onto the right shoulder of the highway. Despite the fast-moving traffic, cars going over 70 miles per hour, Frank stepped out of his vehicle. He looked for a safe moment and began crossing the highway on foot to help the turtle. It was a selfless decision, but one that would soon turn tragic. At the same time, a woman driving a 2020 Mazda CX-9 was approaching in the center lane. She saw Frank and slowed down to avoid hitting him, but behind her, a 2020 Dodge 3500 pickup truck driven by a 53-year-old man from Port St. Lucie didn't slow down in time. The truck slammed into the back of the Mazda at high speed. The force of the crash pushed the Mazda off the road and into a nearby fence. The woman driving the Mazda was shaken but not hurt. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. The pickup truck kept going forward from the impact and struck Frank. The hit was so strong that it threw him across the road and he landed on the left shoulder of the highway. In just seconds, a kind man trying to help an animal had lost his life in a tragic chain of events. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but Frank was pronounced dead at the scene. His loved ones, who were nearby, were left devastated. They had to witness the loss of someone who had only tried to do the right thing. Strangely, no one else involved in the crash was injured. The woman in the Mazda walked away without harm. The man driving the pickup was also unharmed. But despite everyone else being safe, the outcome couldn't be undone. Authorities shut down the southbound lanes of Interstate 95 for hours. Drivers were stuck on the highway waiting for it to reopen. But for those who saw what happened, the lasting memory wasn't about the delay, it was about the man who died doing something good. As for the turtle that started it all, no one knows what happened to it. It might have made it to safety, or it might not have. That part of the story remains unknown. Frank Quinn's death came from a moment of genuine care. He didn't hesitate to act when he saw something helpless. And even though it ended in tragedy, it showed just how far someone might go to protect a life, even one as small as a turtle's. It makes you think. One small choice, one simple moment can change everything. Frank took a risk for something he believed in. And for better or worse, that decision left a mark on everyone who witnessed it.